Berkeley. I'm Tori Mathis, your Director of Communications, and today with me I have Kristen Kapelanski, our Community Development Director, here today to talk with us about her budget and what that process looks like. Kristen, how are you today?
Good. How are you, Tori?
Very, very good. Well, I want to, before we get started, I kind of wanted to share with the community, you are, while you're not necessarily new to the community, you're new within this capacity and role, and we're so grateful internally to have you here with us. And I just would love to share with the community kind of where you kind of come from, let them get to know you a bit more, and just kind of talk about your goals for the community development department and why you chose Berkeley as your not only home, but place to work.
Sure. So as you alluded to, I'm a resident here. I've lived here with my husband and my two kids for about 15 years now, maybe a little bit longer. And we're on our second house here, so we love Berkeley. This is our forever home. I've been working in planning and community development for almost 20 years. And this is my third municipality that I've worked for. And I'd like to tell people right now that I'm kind of in my dream job space. And the reason I'm in my dream job space is because I am so passionate about this community. Prior to joining the department as the director, I was on the planning commission for a little more than 5 years, eventually becoming the chairperson, and really enjoyed my role there, but felt like I could be a more effective leader in the community by joining the department. And an availability came when the previous director left, and I was so excited to be selected for the position.
Yeah, no, well, thank you so much. I can't express how excited we are to also have you here. So if you could share with us, kind of let the community know what, you've been working on, like you said, you've been here and this isn't a new field for you, but obviously, you're kind of getting behind the scenes a bit more and investing on the community development side. So before we kind of dive into, the nitty gritty of the budget, I would just love for the community to hear about what your experience has been. What are those things that, you've been working on with the team that you have here on, the updates and the modifications that you've been making to the department?
Sure. So over the past 5 years, this department has seen a lot of transition. We've been fortunate enough to add an additional staff person. We've been fortunate enough to be able to tackle the master plan, which required some serious updating, having not been updated in about 10 years. So we've been able to tackle some of those things. And what that has done is laid the groundwork for a lot of the changes and improvements that we're trying to do now as I come into the department. So one of those things is the zoning ordinance. I don't know how many residents know this, but our zoning ordinance hasn't had a comprehensive update in about 30 years, which is a really long time.
Wow.
Zoning ordinances, and it leads to issues and problems, not only with commercial development, but with people who want to put a small addition on their house or make some other improvements that require zoning review and approval. So we've just started to tackle that zoning ordinance rewrite now that we have the master plan done. And we're just getting into that now. We're also tackling other sections of the city code and updating those to be commensurate with more modern standards and just current practices of how people use their property and the information the public shared with us as part of the master plan update and how they want to help effectuate, not change, but shape the change that every community undergoes as it gets older. We want to make sure that those things match. We have a number of other initiatives we're undertaking in terms of process updates. We just recently made a move across the hall here at City Hall, and we're working on moving towards more paperless applications and processes, which is a pretty big undertaking.
Yeah, no, it's no shy that I don't shy away about the fact that a lot of things are on paper, given the fact that we're so digitally affluent, I think these days, that I think it surprises people that, we still utilize a lot of paper, which not to say that that's a bad thing, but also not to say that it's a good thing. So I definitely see you guys on a day-to-day going through your documentation. So thank you for sharing that. Switching gears and kind of tying that to the budgeting process, you know, I know you were coming into this halfway through the process, which was probably a great experience to kind of see how we're all over the place some of the times halfway through the fiscal year. But from your first iteration of this, you know, tell us what was that like for you, and what were your focus areas, you know, operationally, strategically, as well as, you know, looking towards the future as far as those three categories go.
So I did walk into this job in last July when you guys were just starting the new fiscal year. And this is my first budgeting season with Berkeley. I have had some budgeting experience with other municipalities, but every community is a little bit different in how they approach their budgeting. I was fortunate in my position that the council had the forethought last year to look at updating the zoning ordinance in this particular budget year, which we're just starting, and have provided funds for that. We'll need to carry some of that through till next year because it's a 2-year project. Mm-hmm. But in looking at budgeting, what I try to do is make sure that the priorities that are reflected in the budget are the priorities that are reflected not only through council's goals, but to our department. So I like to set priorities for our department as high, medium, and low, and kind of pick things off. You know, if there's some low-hanging fruit in the low priority area, sure, we'll tackle that. But we want to focus most of our resources on the high priority areas that are going to have the most impact on development within the community, and on how our customers, which are developers, builders, contractors, residents, perceive our level of service that we provide here, and how easy we make it for people to do business with the city. So when we're looking at budgeting, I try to keep all of those things in mind and propose a budget to the city manager's office that reflected that thinking.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you brought up a good point. As far as clientele, you know, could you share, just for knowledge base, and I'm always about, you know, teaching people about what our departments do, outside of just residents, you know, talk about that if you could share that relationship and those dynamics on balancing both commercial and residential services.
Sure. So I like to think of everyone that comes into the city and lives in the city and does business in the city as a customer of us, and we want to provide them good customer service. Sometimes customers have competing interests and priorities. So we might have developers or builders who are very interested in building, you know, I'm just going to go something really crazy here for point of comparison, but let's say they want to build a 6-story building, right? There are residents who are also customers of the city that absolutely don't want to see that. So our job here in community development is to take the residents' vision, because those are the people that live here, and present it to builders and developers, because they're our customers too, in a way that makes it able for them to effectuate. So in a way where they can help us achieve the goals that we want, to achieve the goals that we want in the most efficient way possible, and while also making money, because that's what they're here to do too. So we're trying to balance all of these different priorities and make sure we end up with the community that we're all wanting to get to, which is what's laid out in the master plan, our ultimate vision for how we want the community to continue to develop.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. So jumping forward then, you know, we're kind of talking about present now, but and you know, how you're planning for the future. What does that look like, you know, for you guys? And I guess I'd love to hear from your perspective, because every director that I've spoken to is a little bit different on how you're anticipating and planning for deferments in the midst of, you know, the white elephant of the Headley amendment and the Headley override millage that we're asking. And what are those ticket items that might come out of that in terms of not necessarily going away, but will be pushed off or have to be looked at differently, depending on how the election goes in May?
Sure. So like I had said previously in our conversation, we were fortunate enough to have some money for the zoning ordinance set aside for this year and for next year. And we also received some grant money from the state to help with those costs as well. So we're fortunate to have that taken care of. We're fortunate to be able to have undertaken and are almost done with a parking study to help come up with a parking strategy for downtown and larger recommendations for the community as a whole. So those are both really good things. However, there are still some things in our department that we really do need to tackle. One of the recommendations that will probably come out of the parking study is that we should consider a mobility plan. So we have a lot of walkable areas and walkable neighborhoods in our community, and that's great. It's a huge asset, but we need to figure out how to build on that asset and build on it in a responsible and efficient way. So it would be great to get a mobility plan together at some point, but it is definitely something that we don't have the funds for right now.
Okay.
The other thing that I mentioned earlier, we and you did too, we go through a lot of paper here. We need to switch to something that's more paperless, right? Most of the world does their business online now, and we need to get there too. And there are services and software out there that would allow us to do that. But the implementation of that and the setup of that comes with a cost. And while we can continue to process things with paper here when we need to, the cost of doing things with paper that we see here and that our customers see is it takes longer. They have to come here to City Hall to apply for things. They have to come here to City Hall to pay for permits. It takes us longer to be able to route things for review when it's all done with paper. It just adds time to the development process, which adds frustration for our customers and means that we're not providing the level of service that we would like to provide for them. And so one of the things that is on our wish list is to get to a more paperless operation and to allow for people to submit permits online, to submit plans online, all of the things that are out there and available to do, but that we need money to implement.
No, absolutely. No, that's a big one. It's something that I see daily. It's something that I think all of our departments see in some form of a capacity. So that's great to hear. Is there anything else, I guess, from an overarching perspective and just your vast knowledge of expertise, just being in this field and being in just the municipal industry that you'd like to share that a lot of people don't really know about on a day-to-day basis when it comes to operational planning, community development planning, or just even budgeting in general, when you're trying to manage all those competing wants from your customers that you'd like to let the community know about, or at least share in terms of tidbits on what you and your team work on constantly.
Sure. So when people think of planning, they often think of what you would. You know, that we're coming up with a plan of how we should do something, of how we want the community to look, of how we want a particular street to look. But one of the things I think that needs to be kept in mind is when we have a great plan that's great, you know, it looks nice, everyone agrees with it, and all of those are good. But we need to be able to implement that plan. And a lot of that comes in with crossover with other departments. You know, we could have a great streetscape plan, but if we don't have the money to implement it and to do those improvements that we would like to see some of our streets, then the plan is just sitting on a shelf and it really becomes outdated eventually. The thing about planning is we can set everyone on the right path, but we kind of need capital money in order to make it get there. So this is kind of a convoluted answer. But the thing I want people to keep in mind is planning can start the ball rolling, but we really can't keep it rolling without all of the work we do with other departments to make sure all the budgeting gets done, to make sure that the plan that the community loves and has had a lot of input on is implemented.
Gotcha. No, I think that's great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. That's really all the questions that I had. For those of you that are keeping up with this series, you can visit our YouTube page at www.youtube.com/City of Berkeley. And for those of you that are interested in learning more about the millage and all that's involved, as well as just a plethora of information on where the funds are going to be spent and how we're keeping people abreast with what's going on, you can visit www.berkeleymish.org/millage, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you.